There's a sense of change in the air, something subtle, yet powerful enough to stir conversations across the globe. Whispers have turned into headlines, all because of one man, Pope Leo XIV. His recent words didn't just surprise people, they shocked, unsettled, and even stirred controversy in some circles. But what exactly did he say? And why are so many reacting with such unease? Before we begin, please comment where you are watching from. A new wind is rising over Rome. And no, it's not the gentle breeze of late spring rustling the flowers in St. Peter's Square. This is something deeper, something spiritual. A force that seems to reach beyond our time, brushing away the dust of compromise to uncover truths many thought had been forgotten. From the heart of the Vatican to the quiet corners of cloisters and seminaries, something is shifting. It feels as if the Church, after years of holding its breath in a fog of confusion, is finally inhaling clarity once again. One name echoes through the marble halls and ancient chapels: Leo. A newly chosen pope, yet already a symbol of a different kind of era. Not because he represents innovation, but because he embodies something timeless. Something rooted, ancient, and deeply Catholic. And the change he brings? It's not rebellion. It's a return. It's a return to the faith that redeems, to the truth that transforms, and to a church unafraid to proclaim the name of its Lord without hesitation. No carefully curated media narratives, no diluted messages wrapped in sociological language. What you encounter now is something different. Here you breathe in the air of conviction. Not modernized doctrine tailored to the times, but timeless truths etched into the foundation of the Church, truths that do not change because truth itself is eternal. For many who had grown used to a softer, more accommodating tone within church circles, this sudden change felt like a cold gust of wind against the neck, startling, bracing, and undeniably real. Pope Leo XIV didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply spoke the faith. And in today's world, that alone was enough to cause a stir. He spoke of the family, not as an abstract concept or as a flexible arrangement, but as the lifelong, stable union between one man and one woman. Not parent one and parent two, not any emotional pairing, but the foundational structure that has supported human civilization for centuries. He addressed human dignity, not in vague terms, but precisely where it is most under threat today. In the silent cries of the unborn. In the lonely rooms of abandoned elderly people. He didn't talk about theoretical injustices invented for ideological battles. He named the forgotten, the unborn, the elderly, the sick, the unemployed, the immigrant. He spoke of peace, but not as an empty slogan fit for international summits. He invoked peace that rests on something solid. Truth. Not lowercase truth shaped by opinion, but truth with a capital T, the kind that forms the bedrock of justice and human dignity. Truth, Pope Leo reminded the world, is not just the foundation of personal conviction, it is the foundation of how we live together in peace. And in his very first address to the Vatican's diplomatic corps, he made that message unmistakably clear. His words didn't just ripple through the room, they rattled the glass walls of an era marked by ecclesiastical progressivism. Why? Because he had the courage to say something many avoid. Truth is not an idea. Truth is a person, Jesus Christ. And once that truth is acknowledged, truly and deeply, it becomes impossible to settle for dialogue that avoids clarity or sacrifices conviction. He wasn't condemning conversation, but he was challenging a culture of dialogue that fears disagreement more than it fears falsehood. He said that peace and truth must walk hand in hand, but peace cannot come by abandoning the truth along the way. That message didn't please everyone. In fact, it seemed to catch off guard those who had grown used to treating the Church like a progressive institution with a touch of sacred vocabulary. But those who have kept even an old catechism tucked away in a drawer knew better. Pope Leo XIV wasn't launching a revolution, he was simply restating the fundamentals. And yet, in an age where the fundamentals are often forgotten or ignored, saying what's obvious has become radical. In times of confusion, consistency begins to look like rebellion. There was one moment in particular, during a speech to the brothers of the Christian schools, that stood out, especially for those still attentive to the voice of the Pope. It was quiet, almost passed over, but it revealed everything. When Pope Leo spoke about young people, his tone at first felt familiar, almost poetic. He described them as a volcano of life, filled with energy, emotion, and creativity. At first glance, it sounded like the kind of language we've heard many times before. Hopeful, inspiring, yet somewhat vague. But then came the shift. The moment where the tone changed, and the message cut deeper. The Pope didn't resort to soft platitudes or general encouragement. Instead, he pointed clearly to what's harming the growth and strength of today's younger generations. And he didn't hide behind academic language or diplomatic ambiguity. He named the problem. He spoke openly of relational models that lack depth, of a culture increasingly shaped by individualism, emotional fragility, and unstable moral compasses. He lamented how the minds of many young people today are shaped not by truth, but by the ever-changing winds of relativism. This wasn't a theoretical concern, it was a pastoral cry. He didn't offer feel-good slogans. He didn't mask his meaning in clever phrases. He said it plainly. Relativism is one of the toxins weakening modern thought and spiritual formation. It confuses right and wrong. It blurs boundaries. It leaves people floating in uncertainty, unable to build strong relationships, stable values, or a solid identity. Pope Leo never mentioned Benedict Roman XVI by name. But for those who've paid attention to the Church over the past 2 decades, the echo was unmistakable. These words reflected the very same concern voiced years ago when Pope Benedict warned of what he called the dictatorship of relativism. Now, in a different voice and a different time, that warning is being repeated. And this time, it seems the world is beginning to listen. Pope Leo Roman XIV is not a leader who speaks in riddles or hides behind carefully crafted ambiguity. He doesn't just deliver speeches, he takes action. And when he acts, his choices speak volumes. There is no room for confusion about where he stands. One of his earliest pastoral decisions made that clear. The appointment of a young Peruvian religious, Father Miguel Angel Contreras Yar Haruna, as bishop. A man known not for media presence or institutional ambition, but for prayer, humility, and strong formation. This was not a symbolic nod to cultural diversity or geopolitical balance. This was a shepherd chosen to shepherd, because the Pope is looking for pastors, not administrators. Leaders of souls, not managers of structures. But Leo's clarity doesn't stop with appointments. Even his living arrangements carry meaning. While his recent predecessors opted for the more discreet, communal residence of Casa Santa Marta, Pope Leo is preparing to return to the Apostolic Palace. To some, this may appear to be a simple logistical preference. But to those who understand the language of the Church, it's far more than that. It is not a lavish gesture, it is a theological one. The Apostolic Palace has, for centuries, stood as the visible seat of papal authority. It is not about luxury. It is about presence. The Pope is not merely a facilitator or a chairman. He is the successor of Peter. And Peter, even in appearance, must remain a visible point of unity and guidance. As the upper floor of Santa Marta, where Pope Francis resided, now begins to empty and quietly return to hosting guests of the Holy See, the message is unmistakable. A chapter has closed, and a new one begins. The message could not be clearer. One era draws to a close, and another begins. But this is not simply a change in leadership, it is a shift in vision. We are entering a time when symbols are no longer stripped of meaning in the name of humility, but are instead being restored to their rightful purpose, to remind us who we are. In a world that often forgets, Pope Leo is choosing to remember. As Scripture says, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." To those quick to label him a reactionary, a rigid traditionalist, a man longing for a church of the past, there is a calm, measured reply. Leo breaks nothing. He restores. But what he restores is not dusty rituals or lifeless routines. He is not reviving tradition as if it were a museum exhibit. Rather, he is recovering something alive, something vital. A church filled with sanctity, anchored in doctrine, driven by mission, and concerned above all with the salvation of souls. He is restoring what time, fear, and modern discomfort tried to bury, not because it was irrelevant, but because it was true. And truth, at times, can be unsettling. Leo walks with a deep awareness of the past and a confident vision for the future. He does not imitate blindly, but he does not disconnect either. His words echo the social passion of Pope Leo Roman XIII, the firm stand of St. Pius X against modernist error, and the luminous theology of Benedict Roman XV. Yet Pope Leo Roman XIV blends these threads into something uniquely his own, a vision rooted in unshakable tradition but directed toward renewal and mission. His eyes are not fixed backward. They are set on Christ and forward, toward what's still to come. At the heart of Pope Leo XIV's message, there is no vague appeal to shared values, no soft focus on abstract notions of the common good. There is no substitute, no symbolic placeholder. At the center, clearly and without apology, is Christ. Not a concept, not an ideal, not a useful symbol to build consensus, but Christ, alive, present, the Son of God, the only Savior of the world. And Pope Leo makes no effort to hide this. He doesn't wrap it in philosophical language or present it as one voice among many. He says it plainly. He proclaims it boldly. In a world, and yes, even sometimes in a church, that has grown used to careful phrasing and accommodating tones, he speaks with clarity and conviction. Because he knows, if Christ is not the center, then everything else is just performance. If the church forgets who she belongs to, then all her activity, no matter how well-intentioned, becomes noise. And so we can say it, freely and without hesitation. Something new is happening in the church. Not a wind of change for its own sake, not a shift in tone to keep up with culture, but a wind that draws us back to what matters most. A return to the essential. A rediscovery of the one who is at the center of it all. The winds of renewal rarely arrive with thunder. They come quietly at first, through gestures, words, and decisions that seem small but speak volumes. With Pope Leo Roman XIV, we are witnessing one of those moments. Not because of grand spectacle, but because of substance. And that, in today's world, is truly rare. It's easy to mistake what's happening as a return to the past. After all, Pope Leo speaks in a way that many haven't heard from a pontiff in decades. He speaks not just with moral clarity, but with spiritual urgency. He doesn't hedge his convictions. He doesn't issue statements that require multiple interpretations. He believes in a truth that is absolute and a church that must be faithful to it, not fashion it to fit the mood of the age. But this is not nostalgia. Leo is not trying to rewind the clock or pretend the last 50 years didn't happen. His vision is not about escape, it's about rediscovery. He is reaching into the church's treasury of wisdom and drawing out what still shines, what still heals, what still saves. It is a recovery, not a retreat. And in doing so, he is quietly drawing a line. A line between what endures and what merely reacts. Between what belongs to the eternal mission of the church and what was momentary enthusiasm now fading with the passing decades. His message is that the church's future doesn't lie in reinventing herself, but in remembering herself. This remembering takes many forms. It's in the way he speaks of the liturgy, not as a platform for personal creativity, but as the sacred inheritance of the faithful. It's in how he addresses moral issues, not as open-ended debates, but as calls to truth and conversion. And it's especially visible in how he defines leadership. For Pope Leo, the shepherd does not follow the flock. He leads them toward holiness, toward Christ, even when the path is difficult. His appointments reflect that same conviction. The selection of men like Bishop Miguel Angel Contreras Yar Haruna is more than administrative housekeeping. It's a signal that what matters now is not visibility or relevance, but fidelity and formation. The church, he seems to be saying, must once again be led by those who pray deeply, think clearly, and love unconditionally, not those who merely manage programs or speak in the language of public relations. It's also clear in the symbols he chooses, or rather restores. His move back to the apostolic palace is not a rejection of humility, but a reclamation of the visible mission entrusted to Peter. It's a reminder that leadership requires presence, that the church, like the world, still looks to Rome for direction, And that direction must come not from personalities or trends, but from the continuity of faith. For Pope Leo, symbols are not empty. They teach, they shape, they remind. And in a time when so many have tried to empty them of meaning in the name of modernization, he is filling them once again with clarity and purpose. A vestment is not just cloth, it's identity. A throne is not about power, it's about service in succession. A ring is not jewelry, it's a sign of fidelity to the bride of Christ. This clarity unsettles some. It provokes discomfort. Because it demands choices. It confronts a church that, in many places, has grown used to ambiguity. A church that sometimes prefers to ask questions rather than provide answers. A church that fears being labeled too certain, too traditional, too different from the world around it. But Pope Leo is not concerned with those labels. He understands something many have forgotten. The world is not waiting for a church that mirrors it. The world is starving for a church that challenges it. That calls it higher. That reminds it of who it is and what it was made for. And he does not do this with anger or resentment. His words are not harsh. They are firm, yes, but full of hope. Hope that the church can rediscover her strength. That she can once again become a light in the darkness, not by chasing relevance, but by radiating truth. That she can be a home for sinners seeking mercy, not a place where sin is renamed and redefined to avoid discomfort. This hope extends especially to the young. Pope Leo's concern for the next generation is not born from pessimism, but from love. He sees in them the potential to build a civilization rooted in truth and virtue. But he also sees the obstacles in their way. A culture of distraction, emotional instability, and a worldview eroded by relativism. Rather than flatter them, he challenges them. He calls them to courage, to sacrifice, to commitment. He tells them that greatness is not found in self-expression alone, but in self-giving. That strength is not found in detachment, but in belonging to truth, to goodness, to God. This is the heart of Pope Leo's mission, to restore. Not just buildings, not just rituals, but the soul of the church. To help her remember who she is, the bride of Christ, the guardian of truth, the mother of saints. And to help her stand firm once more, not in opposition to the world for its own sake, but in fidelity to the one who overcame the world. It is not easy. It will not be welcomed by all. But it is necessary, because without truth, there is no real peace. Without Christ, there is no lasting unity. And without courage, there is no renewal. So yes, something is changing. Not because Pope Leo has launched a revolution, but because he has begun a restoration. And that restoration is not just about doctrine or discipline, it's about the very heart of the church. A heart that is once again beating with conviction. A voice that is once again speaking with clarity. A faith that is once again walking with purpose. And through it all, a gentle but unmistakable wind is rising, not to sweep away the past, but to carry it forward into a future full of promise. This story isn't just about a new pope. It's about a church rediscovering her soul. Because what Pope Leo has begun is not simply a shift in leadership, but a turning of the tide. A quiet but resolute movement back to the source. Back to clarity. Back to courage. Back to Christ. He has reminded the church, and all of us, that strength is not found in compromise, but in conviction. That relevance means nothing if it comes at the cost of truth. And that the church does not need to reinvent herself to remain alive. She needs only to be faithful. Faithful to the gospel. Faithful to the mission. Faithful to the one who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." In every age, there comes a moment of reckoning, a moment when the fog lifts and the path becomes visible again. And though the winds of culture may still blow fiercely, and the storms of confusion may still rage, a new wind has begun to rise within the church. Not the wind of novelty, but the wind of return. Return to the essential. Return to what saves. Return to him. And that, more than anything else, gives us reason to hope. So wherever you are, and whatever your journey of faith looks like today, pray. Pray for the church. Pray for the Pope. And pray for the courage to live, speak, and walk in truth. Because the renewal of the church does not begin in Rome alone. It begins with each one of us. If this message moved you, inspired you, or gave you something to reflect on, consider liking the video, sharing it, and subscribing for more. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. And above all, stay rooted in faith. God bless you.